If I have a role to perform in this whole operation of genealogy in Trinidad, I think I am a kind of bridge between the past and the future. I think basically it's because my parents were genealogists without knowing it. You know, they loved family. So when my father got that car, he and my mother would go to visit family a lot, and they would take me along. And I'll be listening to what they're talking about long time and so on, who came from India and things like that. So all of that inspired me in that way. Also too, around that time, my father would have taken out a map of where we lived in Gaspereau. But what I saw on the map was a name on the top of the map of a fellow named John Manrudin. So I asked my father, well, who is that fellow? And he said, that's his great-grandfather, who turned out, of course, to be my great-great-grandfather. But we didn't have the facility to search for it like the National Archives today. So when I was in Canada, the rage was inside me even more. You know, why did I leave without doing this? So when I came on a holiday to Trinidad in '72, my wife and I and my deceased brother and deceased uncle, they were, of course, they were with me, and we went and researched, and I found Manrudin in the rubble of the Red House, on downstairs in a almost dilapidated section of because all the books were scattered all over. So we were able to find him there. And well, that inspired me to come back home a few years later after finishing the master's. And then I started my all-out plunge into genealogy. I started videotaping of weddings in about 1984. I had heard from people going to weddings and so on. They say a videotape of a wedding is so boring, you know. It puts you to sleep, you know, because you just see the bride and groom and so on. So I said to myself, if I'm getting into videotaping, I'll do what the professionals say. They say you must create something that is different. So what I started to do was to talk to the old people in the family and get the history of the family. Sometimes the documentation, because I was at this time doing documentation in all my school holidays, I would put a documentary, a simple rudimentary documentary that I filmed right downstairs here, where we are here. I'll wait till 1 o'clock in the morning when there's hardly any car passing on the road and so on to disturb the context of the video. And it was so simple that I will put on a Enoch Daniel or something, you know, a long Indian instrumental, and I'll have to go through so it was only about a 5-minute thing, and most of those Indian instrumentals, they go for about 5-6 minutes. So I will run through with a map of India and a map of Trinidad, and I'll do my whole narration there, and then I'll video dub the important paragraphs and so on, you know. Between 1845 and 1917, so many people came from India and so on, and in 1884, a man named so-and-so, and I'll put his document there if I have it. I'll take a picture of him. He might have had a little passport picture or something. I'll take it and blow it up on the screen, and it comes out big on the TV screen. And so the family, when they see it after, they cried. A lot of them, you know, it drove them to tears to see their great-grandfather and so on, or their grandfather on the TV screen. You know, so those kinds of things. And I'll bring it right down to the bride and groom. I was filming the 50th anniversary of a well-known couple from San Fernando, related to the Ishmael Khan stores. And I did the same thing with them. I tell them, well, I said, take me to all the places that were important to you before your wedding. And I wrote a little bit about it and drew a little family tree. And Mr. Alwyn Chow, I think was his name, he is Penny Commissioner's husband, second husband. He was in charge of the Guardian at that time, and he was a good friend of the couple. And he asked the son, who did this? You know, how could somebody say on the 23rd of December, 1872, a ship called the Dilhari brought a couple and their children to Trinidad? And so that's what I wrote. That's what I found and wrote. I didn't fictionalize or anything. This is real stuff, you know. So the fella pointed to me. Well, he saw I was filming and so on, so he couldn't talk to me then. But the next day, right downstairs here, Raviji came on behalf of the Guardian and started to say, well, we want to talk to you first, but we want you to write on the Guardian first. So that's how I started writing, and people started to know about me because I didn't know what I was doing was important. I was doing something very selfishly for myself, in my family. But in the meantime, I was, in the case of videotaping and so on, I started to enter other people's families with their permission, and still with their permission. I don't ever go into a family without getting their permission to do my research. Don't think I'm successful all the time. That is to boast. That's an idle boast, and it's not correct at all, because my work depends on two things, two major things. One, the memories of the family. So as the years and the generations go by, the memories are getting more faded. So it's getting a little harder now to go on to new generations because people can't remember so far back. But luckily over the years I've developed certain skills that help me to bridge some of those, but not all of those problems. So that's one side of it. And two, the documentation must answer what I say. Let's say you start and you want to trace your family. I'll say, tell me what you know. Right? I don't want to know about your parents and so on. Tell me how much you know what you've heard, and I'm sketching it. You know your parents' name, obviously. You know your grandparents' name. Sometimes you might know one or two of your great grandparents. I want to write all of that down. Then when we have done that, I'm going to ask you, well, who could I speak to among your elders? I want to know your elders, and I start with the eldest ones because they might not be around too long. And once they go, they take away all that information which is hardly ever retrievable. The questions I ask is the eldest child that the ancestor from India had in Trinidad, the eldest child. So that puts me in a contextual range as far as the year is concerned. Although some of that is not known exactly, and there's exaggeration and so on. So I ask for, basically, the first thing I will ask for is, do you have any documentation of the arrival or the departure or the release from indentured? Because all of those have the number, the register number of the person. And we can go on talking forever on some of these things. But everybody that came to Trinidad as an indentured worker was given a number. Starting with number 1 on the Fatal Razak. Everybody thinks they came on the Fatal Razak. I thought I came when I said my blood came. So I was excited looking when my first ancestor was 1852, so I didn't make the Fatal Razak, but I know of people who made the Fatal Razak. Anyway, coming back to the number system. Number 1 on the Fatal Razak was a man named Bharat, and India is called Bharat. So when I meet my diaspora friends, I heckle them and say, we have Bharat in Trinidad before you all, So number 1 to 225 is the Fatal Razak in the number scheme. 226 to 492 is the Duchess of Argyle, the second ship. 493 to 6 something, I forget the exact numbers now, is a Bangalore, and so on. And it came right down to the Ganges of 1917. The Indian government has made it important. Now you can become a citizen of India if you can prove your link to India through your great-grandparents. They won't take beyond great-grandparents. And not only that too, you have to get a link. The link is that your birth paper must coincide. Let's say it's your mother's nanny who came. I told you I'd like to start people to do that because it's the simplest one. So for sure the mother's name is on a birth certificate. So your mother's name, your mother's mother's name, and your nanny's mother's name would be very helpful in that process. If your nanny's mother came from India, so you can work that out. So you can get a dual citizenship of India, not dual in the sense, but you get all privileges except you can't go up for election or vote. Nobody really wants to do that, I think. But you can go and own property, education, medicine, all these kinds of things. You will be privileged like an Indian citizen. So that's one side of it. But then it gives people a sense of fulfillment. When I started this, I didn't study about whether I would get something from India or whatever. What I wanted from India was a proof that my ancestor came from India, or my ancestors as it turned out afterwards. People were telling me from the start, because it sold out in the first 3 years or 2-3 years or so, the book was gone, and people who had books lent it and they never got it back and so on. And people keep asking me for it, and There have been several reviews done on it by academics and so on. And this is just printed back again. I said, no, there were certain things I wanted to include. So some new chapters that I've included is one on my wife's side. I didn't work out my wife's side. I knew that the scenarios and so on, but it wasn't working properly, but I did get it out after the book came out. So I'm including a full chapter on her mother's side and father's side. And I'm also including about 26 bio people, like people like Noor Hassan Ali, President Noor Hassan Ali, Nizam Mohammed, former speaker, and a lot of other people from Trinidad and away as well.